Okay. I have to come off.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Everyone hear me? Wonderful. Okay. I apologize really about the difficulty to get in. Hopefully next time we meet, it will be sorted out. Thank you for getting on today. I know, and I received messages from people personally that they said, as much as they would like to sign up for the class, they simply are not in a headspace to sit through a shiur on Zoom, and I completely understand. Really, I understand. There is also something important about, one, learning together, because we will give each other chizuk, we will strengthen each other when we learn together, and despite the extremely challenging situation we find ourselves in, the idea that we are going to attempt to continue our lives the best that we can, despite challenges. And there's another very big, I think, positive aspect, and that is we have the ability to see Ellen in New York and Lori in California, and to get support from them, because we know that their tefillot are with us, and we appreciate so much that you stand behind us, and that's really important. So thank you for that, right? Yehuday New York and Yehuday California, we appreciate it very much that you're standing with us. May our learning today be le'ilui nishmat, all of those who were so tragically murdered, and for refuah shlema, to all those who were injured, and our tefillot to all those who are still missing. May Hashem answer our tefillot. May our learning today be right in zchut, in merit, for all of those things. Today is an introduction, but we are going to get to some Talmud tales. The idea of the course, hopefully for this coming year, is that the Talmud is full of a variety of fascinating discussions. But what I wanted to look at, and together with you, hopefully discuss, are the agadot, the agadita, the stories, or as I call them, tales, because some of them that we will come across are really quite fanciful. And we will actually ask ourselves, did they really happen? But I think that if they're included in the Talmud, then there must be a life lesson for us to learn. And I hope that together we'll be able to perhaps not only look between the lines and get a deeper understanding for these stories, but also I think learning together b'chavruta, right, together in a group. I hope you'll share your thoughts and ideas, as there has to be a reason why we have these very interesting stories. So just really a very quick and basic introduction, which is necessary, because if we're going to call this course Talmud Tales, right, then we need to understand what is the Talmud and where do these agadot, right, what is their place. So the word Talmud actually means study. But when we talk about Talmud, we are talking about the commentary or the expansion on the Mishnah, the first work of rabbinic law, published around the year 200 CE by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi in the land of Israel. When we say Talmud, the word Talmud and the word Gemara mean the same thing. They are the same, right? Sometimes it is this and sometimes it is that, but what is the Talmud? First, in order to understand what is the Talmud, we have to understand what is the Mishnah. So the Mishnah was published at the end of the 2nd century CE. It is an edited record of the complex body of material that we refer to as the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, the oral transmission. And our understanding is that when God gave us the written Torah, he also gave us Behar Sinai, Torah Sheba'al Peh, a tradition which was passed down, orally. And the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot opens with those words: Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, umasra leYoshua, Yoshua lezkenim, zkenim lanivim. Right, and it was transmitted also orally. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi undertook to collect and edit an edition of these halachot laws in order that the learning not vanish or be forgotten. Now, if we think about what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did, it was quite, he was a forerunner. He had a vision Why? Because there surely was tremendous amount of discussion that an oral tradition should always remain oral. That's the purpose of an oral tradition. The problem is that what was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi so afraid of? He was afraid indeed that two things could happen. The oral tradition could be forgotten if it's not passed down. And also, what's the problem? I'm sure all of you played this game when you were small. We used to call it, right? You called it Chinese whispers, right? What's the
Broken telephone.
broken telephone? Thank you, Shushu. Broken telephone. What's the problem with that? And what's the fun in that game? In that when something is passed over from one person to the other, actually to see how much it's changed or how much it's distorted. This was what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was worried about, that when a tradition is passed down orally, something could be changed or altered or distorted. And therefore, he felt it was very important to write it down. The thing is, the Mishnah, although it is written and it's a oral tradition, which is now written, right? It's Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is bichtav, which is very funny, but it still maintains the element of Be'al Peh. What do I mean by that? I mean that you can have a discussion among the rabbis, and then someone will say, oh, that reminds me about, and then go off in a completely strange or obscure tangent, and then come back. And it's very similar to how you are in a conversation with someone, and someone says, oh, that reminds me, right? And then you discuss something else, and then oh, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, we come back to the original subject. And so, although the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Mishnah, is written down, it does maintain a kind of oral tradition to it. And because of it, though, sometimes we will say that there are differences in some places it's written like this, in some places it's written like this. Although it was written down, there are still some elements of oral tradition. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi writes down, right? And this is what we call the Mishnah. And most passages in the Mishnah contain a dispute between different rabbinic sages. When does one begin the morning prayers? How does one constitute a Jewish marriage? What are the limitations of the liabilities of someone who watches another person's property? Can cheese and meat be on the same table? How much drawn water invalidates a ritual bath? On all of these issues and on 1,000 of similar issues, the Mishnah includes various different opinions. And not only do we have various different opinions, we also have Mishnah Stam, which is that it's not credited to any specific rabbi. And we also have V'chachamim omrim, right? There is a dispute among the rabbis, and then there is what? V'chachamim omrim, right? Which is this general body, right, of our sages, and they think differently. The Mishnah has 6 primary sections, and we know this because on the Leila Seder we sing, who knows 6? I know 6, right? Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, and they are, this is the way we learned to remember the order, Zman Nakat, Zraim Moed, Nashim Nezikim, Nakat, Kdoshim, and Terot. Zman Nakat, there are 2 nuns, right? There is Seder Nashim and Seder Nezikin. So I always say to my students, how do you remember which comes first? It's very easy, ladies first. That's the way to remember. Seder Nashim comes before Seder Nezikim. That's how you will remember. So all of these laws deal with agriculture and sacred times and women and personal status, damages, holy things, purity laws. By carefully laying out different opinions concerning Jewish law, the Mishnah presents itself more as a casebook of law. While the Mishnah preserved the teachings of earlier rabbis, it also shows the signs of a unified editing. Part of that editing process included selecting materials, and there are many of those materials which did not make it into the Mishnah. They were collected, and they are a companion volume called what we call the Tosefta, which this was the best translation I could find, appendix or supplement. But what's important about a source which is from the Tosefta is that in terms of weight or time period, it's at the very same time as the Mishnah. So where does the Gemara and the Talmud come in? So after the publication of the Mishnah, the sages of Israel, both in the land of Israel and in the largest diaspora communities at that time, that was Bavel, Babylonia, They began to study the Mishnah and the traditional teachings, and their work consisted largely of working out the Mishnah's inner logic, trying to extract legal principles from these cases, searching for derivations, legal statements, where did they learn it from, etc. Each community produced its own Gemara, which have been preserved as two different multi-volume sets. The Talmud Yerushalmi includes the Mishnah and the Gemara produced by the sages of the land of Israel, and the Talmud Bavli includes the Mishnah and the Gemara of the Babylonian Jewish sages. So when we say Talmud Yerushalmi, it's from Eretz Israel. Talmud Bavli is from the diaspora, from Babel. Most commonly, when a person studies Talmud or studies Gemara, we are studying the Talmud HaBavli. The Talmud Yerushalmi is more difficult, it's not as clear. It's very interesting to compare what the Yerushalmi and the Bavli say on different things, but what's mostly learned and studied today is the Talmud HaBavli. Then on the Talmud HaBavli, on the Gemara, we also have commentaries, and this is the interesting way the page is designed, right, in which we have the text in the middle, and we have the commentaries all around the page. The Talmud, in a sense, was never completed because the Tosafists, the commentators, who are the Tosafists in the Middle Ages, these are the grandsons of Rashi, right? They extended to the whole of the Gemara analysis. And why do I say that in some ways the Talmud was never completed? In that we continue to have even modern commentary on Talmud, even until today. Rav Steinsaltz says that he didn't write a commentary, but he did. He wrote a commentary on the Talmud as well, and so we have contemporary commentaries on the Talmud. We also have Rashi on the Talmud. Talmud is not read, but Talmud is studied. And not only is it studied, it's studied even better when there is a give and take, when there is a chavruta, right? I had a few minutes with Lori before the shiur began, and she's learning Daf Yomi with Michelle Farber in Ra'anana, right? Michelle is in Ra'anana, Lori is in California. But the idea that we don't just read Talmud, but Talmud needs to be studied. The Talmud also contains Agadata or Agada. And these are fascinating tales that, according to me, but according to many, have hidden meanings and profound life messages. Now, I heard this honestly said to me by someone who was in yeshiva. When I said that I'm fascinated by the Talmud tales, he said to me, "Oh, really? That's like nothing. Like when we're in yeshiva, we skip it. You know, like we completely think it's irrelevant." And I said, it's not irrelevant. If the Talmud included these stories, they're there for a reason. They're there for a reason, right? So that's what I hope that we'll have a chance to do this year. Look at some fascinating Talmudic tales. We'll look at these stories in depth, try to understand what were the rabbis trying to teach us through these tales. Now, I thought it's just important to include, and I'm bringing just excerpts from a very well-written article by Rabbi Shlomo Brody from the Jerusalem Post, in which the question is asked, may women study Talmud? Now it seems almost, I don't want to say no-brainer or silly to even pose this question, but it's not, because there are still many institutions in which women are not studying Talmud. What they are studying is what we call Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is Mishnah, but not Talmud. Where does this come from? So the Torah states that one should study Torah every day and night, right? In Sefer Yoshua, V'agita bo yomam v'layla. While this mitzvah is minimally fulfilled by reciting the Shema, the sages commend those who establish fixed times for daily study. And the Chachamim understood that women were excluded from the formal commandment to study Torah, at least in its most comprehensive form. The idea meant that every day you needed to set aside time to study Torah, and perhaps women were not able to do that on a regular basis. But numerous commentators believe that women may study scriptures. What is that? That's Tanakh, and oral law, of course, because it will help them to better understand what it is that they need to do. Women must recite the blessings over Torah study every morning, Birkot Torah, which indicates that they may be rewarded for their voluntary study. Meaning, even women may not be obligated to study Torah. If they want to study Torah, they surely are rewarded. Equally significant, several medieval scholars asserted that women are obligated to learn the material necessary for their halachic observance, meaning a woman has to keep what? Shabbat. Therefore, she needs to study and learn about Hilchot Shabbat. A woman has to run a Jewish home. Then she therefore needs to learn all of the things which are necessary in order to do that as well. Accordingly, many communities historically limited women's education to practical instructions from their mothers with very minimal textual study. There are some Hasidic groups, very enclosed, that still go according to that, meaning there's very little text-based study. Where do you learn? You learn from your mother and your grandmother how things should be done. Yet other decisors asserted that while the Talmud discourages fathers from teaching their daughters, a qualified woman can elect on her own to learn Torah. And this self-motivation proves that women is not turning the Torah's wisdom into trivialities and makes her worthy of reward. They were worried, the Chachamim, that perhaps women wouldn't take Torah study seriously. This dispensation of Rabbi Chaim David Azulai in the 18th century asserted why the Talmud gave Bruria accolades for her wisdom and her knowledge. And we studied together last year about Bruria, and we see that the Chachamim, right, they credited her with all of this tremendous knowledge. Indeed, despite limited educational opportunities, there are many examples of learned women that are mentioned in rabbinic literature throughout the ages. We studied some of them at the end of last year, in the end of the term. We learned about Yalta, and we learned about Bruria, and we learned about other such women. What really happened was, in the 19th century, women began to receive greater general education, and a number of schools for girls developed, particularly in 19th century German communities, with the belief that the knowledge necessary for women to maintain religious commitment was greater than in previous generations. What happened was a change in the world, in that women were receiving general education. And so the sentiment culminated in the early 20th century when the Chafetz Chaim gave his support to Sarah Schneer's network of Beis Yaakov schools. Why? Because what Sarah Schneer understood and saw was that secularly educated women were leaving traditional lifestyle. And he asserted that contemporary women must receive greater exposure to scripture and rabbinic literature. And so what did the Chafetz Chaim understand? That Jewish women, Jewish girls, needed to have proper Jewish education. And so he supported Sarah Schneer in what she was doing, which was to provide, right, a higher level of Jewish education for Jewish girls. I have a student in a retirement community in Talmud. She lived in the same building as Sarah Schneer. It's just fascinating that here are historical people, right? And she actually knew her. She said that Sarah Schneer was a seamstress. That was how she made her living. Very interesting. Other scholars, again, now more contemporary, like Zalman Sorotsky and Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, asserted that women, especially those with a secular education, should be exposed to the most sophisticated rabbinic literature. And Rav Soloveitchik implemented this belief in his own schools, asserting that a Talmudic curriculum was an absolute imperative and that the continued neglect of such teaching has contributed greatly to the deterioration and downfall of traditional Judaism. Many people that I know who grew up in Boston area and went to Rav Soloveitchik's schools, all of the girls learned Gemara. All of the girls learned Talmud, meaning he implemented this in the curriculum. Rav Soloveitchik felt very strongly that everyone should be learning the same curriculum, both boys and girls, men and women, and he was a strong proponent of women also studying Talmud. Again, based on the fact that they were studying secular subjects and they were be exceptional in all different forms, and surely they should also then study Jewish studies on a high level. As Rav Aaron Lichtenstein has argued, students in more traditional circles are indirectly exposed to Talmudic teachings through the biblical commentaries of Rashi and the Ramban, as well as in legal works, and there remains no reason to categorically deny women more intense exposure. The idea, of course, is that now women are exposed to Talmud study in all different ways and in all different forms, and therefore any woman who wants to study Talmud should be encouraged to do so. This curricular development, he further asserted, does not break from traditional halakha, but instead recognizes that the education necessary to inspire the next generation of women towards a religious lifestyle must afford greater opportunities for rigorous and sophisticated study. He said, we owe it, as it were, to the young women or any woman today in today's day and age who wants to expand her knowledge of Torah, that it includes the study of Talmud, if she so wishes to do so, right? And therefore, I think it's taken on almost a life of its own. Women studying Daf Yomi and women taking classes in Talmud. It's really, really outstanding and wonderful. Many, many women enjoy it, right? Again, I think you need to have a Gemara cup. You need to have a good head, right, for Gemara, and you have to enjoy the back and forth, the give and take. But if you haven't ever studied, it is wonderful and important to expose yourself to it. I can share on this group that my first exposure to Talmud was in the study of Laurie's house, right, with her wonderful husband, Rabbi Sheldon Lewis, right? I was a young person. I was a teenager, and I came to their house, and we would study once a week. We would study Talmud. That was my first exposure to Talmud study. What I want to see today are three stories that are all connected to praying for rain. Why? Because as of Simchat Torah, hard to imagine Simchat Torah, right? We began to say, Mashiv Haruach Morid HaGeshem. We began to pray for rain. I don't know about Helen in Ramat Gan, but here in Ra'anana, we've already had rain. We have already had rain, right? And quite strong rain. But the interesting idea is that now we begin to pray for rain. And on the 7th of Mal Cheshvan, we will begin to say what? Ten talu matar livracha, right? We will actually be praying for rain. So from the Musaf of the last day of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, until the Musaf of the first day of Pesach, we add the phrase Mashiv Haruach U'Morid HaGeshem, who causes the wind to blow and the rain to come. It's added in the Amidah in the second blessing called Gvurot, mighty acts, and this blessing includes references to restoring life to the dead. This is the bracha in the Amidah of Mechayeh HaMeitim. And we could ask, why do we add Mashiv Haruach U'Morid HaGeshem Dafka in this bracha? And the rain is to the world like the restoration of what? Of life to the dead. It's Mechayeh HaMeitim. I remember seeing once a National Geographic program about drought, and you can see the earth is literally parched, cracked in Africa, and suddenly it begins to rain, and it's as if the earth has come back to life. It really has the ability, lehachiot, right, to bring the earth back to life. This is why Mashiv Haruach U'Morid HaGeshem is in Birkat Gvurot. We wait until the 7th of Cheshvan to add 10 tal umatar livracha. This is called She'elat Hagshamim. Why? In the land of Israel, prayers for rain, adding the words V'ten tal umatar livracha, commence on the 7th of Cheshvan. In the diaspora, outside of the Holy Land, the prayer for rain is recited beginning on the 60th day. To my camera. And sorry. Let's see. Beginning on the 60th day after the autumn equinox. And if you look in translations of the Siddur in English, it will say either on December 4th or December 5th. I guess each person has to check where they live any specific given year, but this is when outside of the land of Israel they begin to say Ten Talu Matal Libracha. The Mishnah in Masechet Tanit asks, Rabban Gamliel says, one starts to request rain on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, which is 15 days after the festival of Sukkot. Rabban Gamliel explains that one waits these extra days, actually 2 weeks' time, so that the last pilgrim of the Jewish people who traveled to Jerusalem on foot for the festival can reach the Euphrates River without being inconvenienced by the rain on their journey home. Wow, amazing. Why do we wait? Because we know that as soon as we begin to pray for rain, Hashem will give us rain. And what are we concerned about? We're concerned about the Olei Regel, the pilgrims who came from Babel or any outside of the land of Israel, who came to Eretz Israel, and they need to go home. And what will happen if it rains when they're on their journey home? Then the roads will become muddy, and the bridges, right, will all kinds of inconveniences. The traffic lights won't work. All kinds of things will happen once it begins to rain, right? Therefore, we wait for 2 weeks, knowing that the person who came on the farthest journey from wherever they came for Chag Sukkot has time to get home before it actually begins to rain. I think it's very, very beautiful. The Gemara then adds the halacha is according to this opinion of Rabban Gamliel that we do not begin to request rain until the 7th of Mar Cheshvan. Says the Gemara, Rabban Gamliel omer b'shiva bo b'tu yom chag k'dei sheyagia acharon shebeYisrael lenahar prat.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
I just wanted to show such tremendous emunah that we really
Yes.
believe that
Correct.
our prayers could make that difference.
100%.
Incredible. I mean, we've
100%.
seen the
I
rain this
agree.
week. I don't
agree.
automatically think it's. Yeah.
And that's another reason why we don't pray for rain until Chag Sukkot is finished and not before, because we're sure that our prayers will be answered and we don't want it to rain in the Sukkah. The Mishnah describes that as well. Right. But I think the idea that we are so sensitive to our fellow, right, to our fellow Jews who have made a pilgrimage from outside of the land of Israel to come to Eretz Yisrael during Chag Sukkot, and we don't want them to be inconvenienced. I think it's even more. We want their journey to be a pleasant one. Why? So that they'll come back. we want their stay in Eretz Yisrael to be pleasant. And so we don't want them to go back and say, oh, the journey was terrible. Next year, I'm not going to come. I will pass. No. So we wait those 2 weeks and then we begin to ask for rain. I think this shows the strong connection between the Jews in Eretz Yisrael and the diaspora, meaning that we care so much about the pilgrims who come from far, and we want to encourage them to continue to make the journey, right, during the Shalosh Regalim. So who are the people, according to the Talmud, who merit to bring the rain? All of these 3 stories come from Masechet Ta'anit, and what is interesting, or what do they have in common? Masechet Ta'anit often deals with or speaks of a time when there is a drought in the land of Israel. Why, according to the Talmud, do we fast? Well, we fast for many different reasons. We fast because of the temple was destroyed. We fast, right, of Yom Kippur, but we also fast when there is a drought. A drought in Eretz Yisrael is a reason to establish a fast day. And the Talmud gives many different, right, how extreme and how many days we wait and what we do in order to go out and pray for rain. So this is our first story, Masechet Ta'anit 24a. The Gemara relates, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi declared a fast, but rain did not come. Now, it's not so strange, but we would hope that a fast day would, again, we understand that not eating and drinking is in order to move people to cheshbon nefesh, right? That we're not just not eating and drinking, we're praying, we are asking God to send the rain. And although Rabbi Yehuda Nasi declared a fast, the rain did not come. Ilfa descended to lead the service before him, and some say it was Rabbi Ilfi. 2 interesting things in this part of the story. One is descended to lead the service. Why is that interesting? Because in our Batei Knesset, what does the Chazan do? The Chazan goes up. There's a bima, right? Which is like a bama, right? The Chazan goes up to lead the service. In ancient synagogues, if you go on tours with a tour guide or archaeologist all over Israel, you will see ancient synagogues. The place of the prayer leader is lower than the congregation. Because of the verse in Psalms and Sefer Tehillim, Mi ma'amakim karaticha, I call you God from the depths. Now think about the fact that acoustically it's more difficult because the Chazan is not standing up, the Chazan is standing lower. But also think about the humility which it requires, that the Shaliach Tzibur understands that I'm going down, not up to perform, but rather down in order to offer prayers. So this is important in the story because it says descends to lead the service. And now it's interesting to see that there is some type of discussion as it's unclear whether it's Ilfa or Ilfi. Is it that we're not sure how he pronounces his name, right? Or is this person kind of unheard of or obscure in comparison to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi? So this person who we're not sure if it's Ilfa or Ilfi, he went down to lead the service. And he said, he who makes the wind blow, and the wind indeed blew. And he continued to recite, he who makes the wind, he continued to recite, and he who makes the rain come, and the rain came. Here comes this person who we don't even know who he is. And what does he say? Mashiv ruach. And suddenly the wind begins to blow. Umorida geshem. And suddenly what? The rain begins to fall. And this is a person who we never heard of before. He's very obscure. Meanwhile, the great Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the person who compiled the Mishnah, made a fast day, and his prayers were not answered. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi turns to this man, and he said to him, what are your good deeds in the merit of which your prayers are answered so speedily? What does Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi recognize? That if this man's prayers were answered immediately, it suddenly begins to rain. As soon as this man begins to pray, that he has merits. What are your good deeds? He asks him, right? He's very curious to know, what is it that you do that you merit to bring the rain? Well, I attempted, but I did not succeed. He said to him, I live in an impoverished city in which there is no wine for Kiddush or Havdalah. I go to the effort of bringing the residents wine for Kiddush and Havdalah, and I thereby enable them to fulfill their duty. In reward for this mitzvah, my prayers for rain were answered. What does this man say? What are his good deeds? First of all, he lives in an impoverished village. Everybody where he lives is what? Is poor. What do they not have? They don't have wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. And we have to understand that wine was expensive. Not everyone could afford wine. What does he do? He buys, right? He makes sure that the residents have wine for Kiddush and Havdalah to enable them to fulfill their mitzvah. And he says, this is my zchut. This is what I do. And because of this, the rain obviously came. That is my good deed, and that is my merit. Okay. In the Musaf of Shabbat, we praise people who provide for the needs of the community, providing light. And look what we say. Mi shabach Avatenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, u'yivarech et hakahal hakadosh hazeh. And what do we say? And all those who come to pray, etc. Umi shenotnim ner lema'or, those who help for there to be light. Ve'yain lekiddush u'lehavdalah, and those who provide what? Wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. Upat la'ochim u'tzedakah la'aniyim. Wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. Hospitality and tzedakah for the poor. What are we saying in a public setting in the Bet Knesset on Shabbat during Musaf? That we recognize that there are charitable people who not only give tzedakah or hospitable and open their homes, but they also help with what? Ner lama'or, making sure that there is light, and yain lekiddush u'lehavdalah, right? That help people have wine for Kiddush and Havdalah, because this would perhaps be considered a luxury, right? It's not food that people need, right? Who needs wine? But wine enables people to fulfill a mitzvah. Look at the top of page 5 and the questions that I asked on this story. What is so special about what this person does? And is it halachically necessary? Why did I ask that? Because if you open any bencher, and you look up Kiddush, what will you find? Next to the bracha of Borei Pri Agafen, it says what? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. It is acceptable to recite Kiddush over bread. Meaning, what this person does is, it's not halachically necessary. Even if he lives in an impoverished village, surely people have what? A loaf of bread to make hamotzi. And they could make Kiddush over bread. We see it, it's written. What does he allow them to do? By providing them with wine for Kiddush. First of all, he allows them to do the mitzvah, what? On a higher level, as it should be. And he gives them hope. He gives them hope. He instills in them, right, the ability to fulfill the mitzvah at its highest level. When is Kiddush said and when is Havdalah said? Well, Kiddush is at the very beginning of Shabbat and Havdalah is what? At the end of Shabbat. He provides for them yain lekiddush ulehavdalah, meaning he provides for them enough wine that they know that they have wine for Kiddush and also for Havdalah. Why is this important? I think he instills them with a sense of the holiness of Shabbat because I don't have to worry. Will I have enough? I have enough wine for what? For Kiddush and Havdalah. How does he provide both Geshem and Ruach to the community? And here there's a play on words. And that's why I think the story is very, very powerful, right? We know that the bracha for rain is Mashiv HaRuach Umorid HaGeshem. But we also know in Hebrew that the word Ruach has two meanings. One is wind, and what's the other? Spirit, right? Spirit. What does this man do? How does he provide for them Ruach and Geshem, or Gashmiut? Well, first he physically gives them wine, which is important, but he also gives them Ruach, not wind. He gives them hope, right? He allows them to, right? He provides the service for his impoverished community, giving them hope that perhaps this week, what, will be better. And I think that's so important. Help me to have an uplifting Shabbat so that I can go into the coming week. I can enter Shabbat and I can exit Shabbat with a sense of hope, with ruach, with spirit. And so this person literally takes care of the needs of his community. My impression is that the same man, if he had financial means, he could have had a storehouse and he could have gone to Rami Levy or Costco and he could have bought wine and he could have said to everyone, you know what, there's a machsan here. Anyone who needs wine, just go and take what you need. But I think what he recognizes are the needs of the people in this community. And I think that's a very high level of tzedakah, because not everyone needs the same. And so he's extremely attentive as to what is necessary in his community. And I think he gives them hope that maybe next week we won't need to accept, right, the gift. Maybe we will have enough money to be able to do it ourselves, and we won't need to accept tzedakah. The second story, also in Tanit 24a. Rav happened to come to a certain place where he decreed a fast, but the rain did not come. The opening of the story is almost identical. Again, there is a drought in Eretz Israel. There is no rain. A very, very well-known and famous established rabbi calls for a fast day, and his prayers are not answered. There is no rain. The prayer leader descended to lead the service before him. Once again, the same idea, and said, he who makes the wind blow, and the wind blew. And he continued and said, and he who makes the rain fall, and the rain came. And what's interesting is that in this story, we don't even know the name of the person. He's anonymous. And Rav said to him, what are your good deeds? Again, there is an understanding that the rain falls because of a person has ma'asim tovim, has good deeds. And he said to him, I am a teacher of children, and I teach Torah to the children of the poor as to the children of the rich. And if there is anyone who cannot pay, I do not take anything from him. And I have a fish pond, and any child who neglects his studies, I bribe him with the fish, and I calm him and soothe him until he comes and reads. This is one of my favorites. This is so beautiful. What is special about this person, and why is he truly an educator? He's truly an educator because he doesn't differentiate between the children of the rich and the children of the poor. What does he see? He just sees a child in need of education. And it doesn't matter what your financial bracket is and what your parents do for a living. None of that is relevant. All I see is a child in need of education. I teach the poor, the children of the poor, and the children of the rich. And if someone can't pay, what? I don't take money. Why is that relevant? Because what's important here is that the child receives an education. And what is the story with the fish pond? Okay? What's significant about this method of taking children to the fish pond? And how does he encourage them to learn? I think what the Chachamim are describing here is such an advanced educational method. It's that this man recognizes that not every child learns the same. And some children cannot learn in a frontal classroom. And therefore, they need to be encouraged in a different way. And he takes them to the fish ponds. He doesn't give up on this child, right? And say what? Stand in the corner, go outside, all those things that teachers in the past say to children who are having trouble in the classroom. What does he do? He takes them to the fish pond. And then he says, right, I encourage them, right? I bribe him with the fish, I calm him, and I soothe him until he comes and reads. Meaning I find alternative methods to help this child learn. How progressive, right, are we when we talk about this person as being a true educator, right? Today in education, we know this to be true, right? Some children learn better, Dafka, when you take them out of the classroom, when you go outside into nature, right? And that's the idea of the fish pond. But it surely means let's expand, let's understand. We will not give up on this child, but rather we will find a way to help him, encourage. He says, I bribe him with the fish, okay? I soothe him until he learns. Ruth Calderon, an outstanding Talmudic scholar, the story was translated, her piece, Reflections on the Story, were translated by Ilana Krishan. If you haven't read her book on Talmud, it's a wonderful, wonderful story, right? She gets through a divorce by studying the Daf Yomi, and it's a wonderful read. It's really a exceptional story. So, what does Ruth Calderon write? She writes, what succeeds in piercing the hardened heart of a God who withholds the rain? The storytellers of the Talmud look for a man who will be able to break through the cycle of drought and teach the God of dryness to be gentle. They seek a man who can bring down the rain. A competition sets in between the simple kindergarten teacher and Rav. Rav, who is a spiritual leader held in the highest esteem. In contrast, the kindergarten teacher is utterly anonymous. We don't know his name in the story. His work is simple. He keeps fish in a small pond behind his house, even in times of drought, against all odds. He is the hero because he sees the pain of a troubled little boy, and he doesn't fear him, and he doesn't label him as a deviant beyond help. Rather, he leads him to the water, instructing him all the way like a true teacher. I bring him to the water. Water symbolizes Torah. The idea that I bring the child to the fish pond because what? We don't give up on anyone. So if I can't bring it to the classroom, I will bring the child to the water. The story depicts a multiple mirroring effect. A boy who has trouble reading, a teacher, a congregation and a rabbi, Israel and God, parched land and the heavens above. A whole system is dammed, stopped up, and closed off. When we think about what drought represents, it's very important because we say in the second paragraph of the Shema, God says, if you don't listen, right? It's a punishment. We have to understand, what can we do to open up the heavens? A kind hand on a child's shoulder and the gift of a fish realigns the universe. It is the Jewish butterfly effect. A teacher opens his heart to an unruly child in a classroom somewhere, and a community leader assured of his own greatness finds himself gradually disillusioned, his limitations made known publicly because Rav couldn't bring the rain. The censored leader is brought down, but so is the rain. The heavens look at their reflection in the waters of a small fish pond, and suddenly it happens. Kindness overspills the bounds of justice. The rain bursts forth. God's plenitude showers us. How pleasant it is in the emptying lofts of heaven, wet. Perhaps even God is crying. What brings the rain? When Akadosh Baruch Hu sees this gentleness of this teacher with this child who's having such difficulty learning and doesn't give up on him, but rather, right, is gentle in educating, this is what brings the rain. With this story, the Talmud presents an alternative form of masculinity that also knows how to caress, to cross bounds and go beyond the letter of the law, to win over a child by means of a fish. Today, we would probably substitute a candy or a sweet, right? But I guess a fish was a prize, right, for the child. The Talmud suggests a model of gentle masculinity that ministers to young children without violence, reacting with a gentle touch to a blow struck in the classroom, offering closeness between a teacher and a child, instead of distance from the child, his studies, and his community. It's a reflection of how, for many years, children were taught, which was a classroom in which people were what? I mean, even my parents described being hit on the hand with a ruler. My students from South Africa, there was a cane that the head miss, what was the principal would use, meaning that's not so far-fetched, but many children suffered, right? That type of punishment in the school. And here we have a kindness of a teacher. This is the kind of person who is able to cause the wind to blow and the rain to fall. And our last story, the feminine angle. Of course, we're in Matan. There has to be a feminine angle. Abba Chilkiah was the grandson, Tani 23. Abba Chilkiah was the grandson of Choni HaMa'agel. And we know Choni HaMa'agel is known as the rainmaker. We will talk about Choni as well. When the world was in need of rain, they would send the Chachamim to him and he would pray for mercy and the rain would fall. Once the world was in need of rain and the sages sent a pair of sages to him so that he would pray for mercy and the rain would fall. Abba Chilkiah said to his wife, I know that the Chachamim have come due to the lack of rain. Let's go up to the roof and pray for mercy. Perhaps the Holy One, blessed be He, will be appeased and it will rain, and we will not receive credit ourselves for the rainfall. What was Abba Chilkiah hoping? Right? They won't see that we have gone up to the roof to pray, and they will think just by chance the rain clouds have appeared, and we will not be credited, right, with bringing the rain. So what happens? Abba Chilkiah goes up to the roof, and so does his wife. He stands in one corner, and she stands in the other, and clouds begin to form on the side where his wife stood. And the Chachamim see the rain, and they also notice where it comes from. They see that the rain clouds are on the side of the roof of the wife of Abba Chilkiah. I once taught this story to a group of elementary school children, again, on a very basic level, and they said to me, what is her name? And I said, her name is the wife of Abba Chilkiah. And they were very dissatisfied with that answer. So I said, okay, so give her a name. So they said, Giveret Chilkiah. I said, Metsuyan, korim la achshav Giveret Chilkiah. Another child raised their hand and said, let's call her Ima Chilkiah if his name is Abba Chilkiah. So wonderful. We're now renaming the heroine of the story. There is Abba Chilkiah and there is Ima Chilkiah. And what do the Chachamim see? They see the rain coming from where she is standing on the roof. And so the Chachamim say to Abba Chilkiah, we see that the clouds have formed on the place where your wife stood. Why is that? What does she do that she merits to bring the rain? And Abba Chilkiah very clearly has an answer. And he says, When a poor person comes to the door, my wife gives them bread. In contrast, I give them money. And that's why her prayers for rain were answered first. What does Abba Chilkiah understand? Her level of tzedakah is higher than his, because she gives the poor person ready-made food that the person can eat, while he gives money, which is a very important tzedakah, but then the poor person has to go with that money, what? To the marketplace, purchase something, go home, prepare it, while she gives them ready-made food. And I'm reminding you that this is in times of drought, meaning everyone is suffering from a lack of food. But if anyone comes to the door, she gives them ready-made food. And the other thing Abba Chilkiah says is why her prayers were answered first, is because when certain hooligans, the Gemara calls them bilyonim, were living in our neighborhood, I prayed that they should die, and she prayed that they should repent. Meaning she has a certain type of what? Rahmanut, right? She is more compassionate than I am. I see a problem. There are hooligans in my neighborhood. I just want the problem to go away. Therefore, I prayed that they should die. She, on the other hand, she prayed that they should repent, meaning that actually, right, they should change their actions. Abba Chilkiah offers two explanations for why his wife's prayers are answered. The first is that she gives them ready-made food, and he gives money where they need to still purchase the groceries. And the other is that she sees beyond the delinquent's behavior. She prays that they should improve their behavior instead of just praying that they should die. The thing that occurred to me is that the Talmud actually says, in describing where Abba Chilkiah and Giveret Chilkiah stood on the roof, uses the words in the Gemara, mizavita de beitahu, from a different angle of the roof, meaning we are assuming it's not a slanted roof, but a flat rectangular roof, and that she stood in one corner and he stood in another. But the word zavita, zavit in Hebrew, also means angle, like in geometry, but it could also mean perspective or point of view. Abba Chilkiah's wife's prayers are answered because of her unique angle of perspective. What does she do? Because of her, the rain comes, because she sees, I'm going to use the term, she sees the whole picture. While he only sees a little bit, she sees a person who comes knocking on the door in need of food, and that's what she provides while he gives money. But money does not solve the problem straight away. The person still needs to go and buy and prepare, etc. And the same with regard to the hooligans. He just wants to be rid of them while she sees the big picture. These are not bad people, right? They're misguided youths. We need to pray that they should repent. What do all of these stories have in common? These three stories that I brought from Masechet Ta'anit, and all of them connected to people. Shebizchutam yored hageshem. Because of them, they merit to bring the rain. In each story, the person who merits to bring the rain is unexpected. In the first two stories, we had two great rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we had Rav, and the person who brought the rain was the anonymous teacher, right? Or the person who provided yain lekiddush u'lehavdalah. And we're not even sure what his name was, Ilfi. And in the third story, the Chachamim were sure that it was going to be Abba Chilkiah who brought the rain. No, they were mistaken. It was his wife. In all three stories, the person who brings the rain is the unexpected one. It's the person who is behind the scenes. And also, it's the person who acts on behalf of others. There is a teacher of small children. There is a person who sees the needs in the community, and a person who feeds the poor, even in times of drought. I think that these agadot, I think these stories come to teach us an incredibly important lesson about who are the people in our own communities, in our daily lives, who have tremendous zchuyot. It may or may not be the people we expect. It may actually be the people who are doing such important work quietly behind the scenes. The kindergarten teachers and the women who provide food for people who need, and what? And those who are doing, meromemim et haruach, bringing ruach and geshem to people who desperately need. These are the people who bring the rain. I think it's such an important thing. Look beyond the titles, look beyond the important people that we think that they are the movers and the shakers. The people who really are the ones who are bringing for us tremendous bracha in the way of geshem, right? Ruach and geshem are the people who are doing kindnesses one for each other. I hope that, again, each and every one of us is in a time and place where we could be that person, right? With small kindnesses, we should really be able to bring Bezrat Hashem, Gishmei Bracha, rain, which indeed brings us blessing, and with a special bracha, that we should have peace and security here in our land, that all of our chayalim should come home safely, that all of our citizens should stay safe. Thank you, everyone, for getting on. I appreciate it. It's wonderful, really, to learn together. We should have not only Gishmei Bracha, but we should have Shalom, Bezrat Hashem, and we will update in 2 weeks' time. Bezrat Hashem, I look forward to seeing you in person and on Zoom, but we, of course, keep in touch, and I will let you know what's happening, Bezrat Hashem, in 2 weeks' time for our next, keep you in suspense for our next Talmud tale. Like it used to be in the olden days in the television set, that it would stay tuned for the next episode, right? I'll keep you in suspense. Thank you, everyone. Shavua Tov. Best wishes to everyone. Keep healthy, keep safe, take care of yourselves. Toda rabah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Stay safe. I know it's hard. I was in Israel until last Thursday. I just got back to the States.
Really?